I'm joined again by my two favorite political conversationalists, Amy Blancett, Nick Reed, Ozarks First contributors both. And we're going to throw a hot one at you now, no pun intended. Sex education in public schools. Just a little something.
I wonder what the pun was going to be.
Yeah, well, we won't go into that. It's a family show. So the question being, should there be sex education in public schools? I know at one point, folks thought this was a settled issue. Yeah, you had it. I mean, I think we all had it growing up. But now it seems there's a pushback going on. Either people are taking their kids out of school to be homeschooled because they don't want that information being shared, or they just think philosophically it's not the role of the government and the school system to do. We'll start with Nick.
All right. So I think for a lot of us, 8th grade, I think it was 9th grade for me. Actually, I moved. I had it in 8th grade. And then when I moved, I got it twice. So I was like, I'm an expert at this by the time my freshman year rolled around. What qualifies as sex education has changed drastically.
Has it?
I think so. When I had it, maybe it was different. It was much about just the anatomically functioning aspect of man and woman. Okay?
Right.
Did you have the heat maps? I had heat maps.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so.
I must be old, but we didn't do those.
Yeah, well, I don't know where you went to school. But nowadays, and I don't know that it's so much around here, but in this, you'll see this every so often pop up. It's more about the different types of and how people can explore or kids can explore and experience. So I think it is much, much different than what it once was. For me, largely it is about what is the purpose of school. And I really do believe, especially as we are in a world that is becoming smaller and smaller and smaller, and you know the jobs that you know kids graduate and then they go to college and they're competing for, whether it's just with a high school education or college education, they're competing against people all across the world. And so everything they're taught, I ask myself, do I believe that this is going to help them in that scenario? Not only is it not going to benefit young people when they get out into the real world in terms of competing, but it's actually a detriment because it's taking up time when we can learn other things to compete against
But
students.
Here's the deal, though. If not in school, where? Because it's not the case. Yeah,
I failed as a parent. You know, it's one of those where
my parents did too, but they can't see this, so it's okay. The point is that honestly, I didn't get a lot of information at home. So school was actually, that's how that goes.
My mom did a good job of having really awkward conversation with us when we were little. She took a psychology class. She'd gone back to school, or had started college as an adult, and she brought home this really awkward, you know, psychology and you know, things, sexual education. And so my sisters and I are sitting through this, and it was so extremely awkward. I appreciate that she did it, but it was awkward. In the health class, it was based on health, and there was a lot of anatomy. There wasn't so much on how you express yourself, but more of the safety of. You know, we learned about the diseases and things like that my mom kind of covered, but it wasn't the same as seeing those very graphic pictures and then realizing that some of these diseases are lifelong, but more importantly, they're preventable.
Well, and I was going to say, too, unwanted pregnancy.
Yes.
We had talked about abortion a few weeks ago, right? I mean, there is a link between somebody at least knowing about protected sex on some level and not getting into a situation where abortion might be a consideration. So, but that doesn't take away from Nick's concern and folks who agree with that
and
point
that is a concern, like as a parent wondering, okay, what type are they educating my children at what point, you know, and that's where, again, when you involve government, it becomes very, now we have to educate about all forms of, you know, every type. We need to be inclusive, which I agree with, but not everyone does. Not everyone has those same beliefs. So I understand where people have discomfort in the idea that the school is going to teach beyond what I'm comfortable with my kids knowing. But also, like I said, I failed. My kids, anytime I tried to bring up even conversations about sex, like they're going to be so embarrassed watching this, even on the idea of, oh my gosh, my mom is talking about sex. But the conversations they're having with their friends, and the conversation that then I got to have with a health teacher who was so open and was so comfortable, maybe wasn't, but pretended to be so comfortable. I had a safe place to go to ask questions. And I'm afraid if we say none at all, when a kid has a question and they can't go to their parents, they're going to go to YouTube, they're going to go to, you know, what means are they going to go to? I think we got to be careful when we say none at all. Then that means my child doesn't have a safe place, an outlet somewhere else, because I understand. They don't want to come ask me about awkward sex questions.
Maybe it's the parents that need the classes
Right,
on how
I
to
know.
teach.
Yes.
Well, and I do think that you do, so, and this would be a gray area for some people, there is the reality of the biology and the anatomy, but I know that in some areas of the country, it's getting more into questions of personal morality for people. And to me, I think that's a family, that's a parent. I don't think in schools we should be really directing kids one way or another in that area, that, you know, the basics perhaps arguably from a science standpoint, biology standpoint. But when it comes to the decisions that one morally makes for him or herself, what to do with that knowledge, I think school's not a good place for that.
I agree. You know, it's that idea of when religion comes into play with how do we make those decisions, the idea of waiting until you're married. Now all of a sudden we get uncomfortable about that.
You know, learning about that information isn't a contradiction to waiting until you're married, because once you're married, that all is going to come into play anyhow.
Yeah, but there are people who say as soon as you start talking about it, it's the same idea with, well, if you had condoms available in school, that's going to encourage immoral behavior. So I think that's why we get into this binary. It's like nothing, or you end up having almost anything go.
And I honestly, I'm not sure what segment of the population any longer says nothing at all. I don't know the answer to that.
Well, from a policy standpoint, I think it's gone there because it's easier, as opposed to having to fight with the teachers' unions and everything else to say,
where's the line?
And here's how you have to do it, because it would just not work.
Right.
No, but I mean, again, we go back to, can this time be also spent, and like you had said, in the education and talking about the culture of, so that, you know, I really didn't feel comfortable talking to anyone about it. And with first sexual experiences, there again was this weird, like there wasn't much conversation. We don't talk about it. And so then it becomes very hidden and very, you know, we talk about it being very sinful. And then all of a sudden one day it's not sinful because you had this activity. So it's just this really strange culture that we have that goes along with its relationship to sex and sex education and healthy sex.
I have a great idea.
I still don't understand any of it.
I think we should continue this on our podcast.
Yes.
Oh.
Lots to discuss.
From the constituency, featuring myself talking to these two who are Ozarks First contributors, Amy Plensett and Nick Reed. Again, we really appreciate it. We have solved nothing except maybe some parents are going, yeah, I got a lot I got to work on. At any rate, we'll be back after this.